Hello. Thank you for joining me. This is my second day sharing the passages that are most prominent to me and my synthesis of the focus topics covered in Book 31 of my Book Week series, Alan Watts' Beyond Theology. In our quest to make sense of the world, we take what we perceive through our senses and we push it into thought form in order that we can calculate with it. And we use these thought forms in order to construct an understanding of what may be happening around us, such that we may navigate with it in a way that we perceive to be optimal. What we've learned and the way that we've evolved in order to maneuver through our ecosystem is astonishing and wonderful, absolutely valuable. And I think that we collectively have forgotten what we might be missing. It's no wonder that we've forgotten. It's not a bad thing. And yet, imagine all that we might be missing in our quest to calculate, in our quest to create thought form out of the reality that we are perceiving, such that we can use our tools to calculate about it, to construct with it. Imagine all that we might be missing. I believe that when we feel an instinct, our body is registering something that our thought form may have missed. And we all too often fail to trust our bodies that are maneuvering outside or on the periphery of what we've come to trust, which is simply our perception translating into symbols. One of the symbols that we so often use is word form. And I think that this is a wonderfully apparent way to illustrate what I'm talking about here. We use words in order to communicate, and we so often can become enchanted with words and forget that they aren't what they are symbolizing. They aren't, they can't be a sufficient way to become what they symbolize. Money is another wonderful way to illustrate this. We understand the value that in what money represents, but we so often forget that the money itself is not the substantive value. Alan Watts illustrates this perfectly in suggesting that when we're at the supermarket and we approach the cashier with a cart full of goodies, we then find out how much those cost and we pay for those goodies. And let's say we pay $200 for our groceries, and we feel we've lost $200, that was a steep price to pay for food. And we often fail to recognize that the goodies are in the cart. We're taking them home. We haven't lost the $200 worth of value. What it symbolizes is what we're taking with us. So all I want to suggest is that what we might be missing is absolutely incalculable. That's why and how we are missing it. And I think that we far underestimate how much we might be missing by focusing on the thought form and the calculation with thought form that has given our ancestors and us a sensation of agency in maneuvering with our ecosystems, and thank goodness for it. And when we continue, despite all this that our ancestors passed down to us, when we continue to feel out of control, might we consider all that we've been missing in order to evolve to this point? Might we consider what is available to us there? I want to loop this around into my first reading of the day. This is in reference to just what I've been talking about here. Thought form, the symbols in words. I'm on page 61. It represents, above all, the birth of that special type of human consciousness which we associate with Western civilization, a consciousness that is, on the one hand, analytical and sharply focused, and on the other, very much turned back upon itself, a consciousness that is embarrassingly self-conscious. Without further ado, I'll move on toward today's readings. Enjoy.
Page 52. The Sanskrit word upaya means cunning or deceit when used in a political context. But in the context of Hindu or Buddhist discipline, it designates the skillful means which a teacher employs to help his students outwit their own egocentricity. In the same way, the biographies of the Christian saints abound in stories of overcoming the devil by what St. Francis Xavier called holy cunning. For in this case, the devil is one's own guile, one's own infinite capacity for looking at oneself, looking at oneself, looking at oneself. As when one is proud of being humble, proud of recognizing that one is proud of it, and proud of being subtle enough to see that the whole thing is an infinite regression. Page 60. It is first of all the aim of science to translate, transfigure all natural processes into words or mathematical formulae, thereby making the whole world intelligible. Once this has been done, the irregularities and rough edges of the world can be conformed to an ideal pattern of how things should be. This is the work of technology. Page 62. The foundation of analytical thinking is attention. To attend, to notice, is to focus consciousness sharply upon some restricted area. It is to use the mind like a spotlight, illuminating the world bit by bit, keeping the bits organized and classified by the system of tags or pigeonholes which words provide. Page 64. To know, and to know that you know, means paying attention. It means concentrating on the motions of life one step, one wiggle, one pulse at a time, so as to figure them out. But just as soon as this narrowed and bright attention has figured out how it is that we live and move, think and speak, the process no longer happens of itself. From then on, we are responsible. We must make it happen and decide through the pain of thought what course it shall take. From then on, we move with constant anxiety because we never know for sure what is right, and with constant guilt because we are nonetheless responsible, and because in the instant that we become responsible, something goes deeply and strangely wrong. Page 68. The supreme method, the royal road of all gurus and spiritual masters, is to make the fool become wise by persisting most consistently in his folly until it reaches a complete reductio ad absurdum. Page 70. Those who ate the fruit would become as gods, for they would know how to control events and how to make things happen. This is why Adam's fall and expulsion from the garden involves the curse of work, For once you start controlling things according to your deliberations, you can no longer rely upon impulse. You must stop playing and be serious. You must think of the future and plan for it, and thus become aware of death in an altogether new way, as a dragon lying at the end of the passage, as the final humiliation of all that you, by your skill, have achieved and controlled. Life becomes the putting off of death, and so begins the reign of anxiety. Page 72. I've suggested that the fundamental dynamics of the universe is the game of hide and seek, lost and found, or peekaboo, the play of yes and no, positive and negative, up and down, which goes on because the light side overcomes the dark side again and again, and is light only so long as it does so. Explicitly, that is on stage, the light and the dark are enemies, but implicitly, off stage, they are not only friends, not only twins, not only co-conspirators, but constitute a unity which cannot be described, since every word, every label designates what is in some class. There's no word that designates the inside and the outside of a class simultaneously, in such a way as to describe the complete inseparability of the two. But, if I may be so bold as to say so, the final metaphysical secret is that the boundary between all insides and all outsides is held in common by both, that insides are not found without outsides, nor outsides without insides. This invariable inseparability of things, quite different from each other, seems to imply some sort of hidden conspiracy, some agreement, some unity of essence behind the scenes. Page 75. Lucifer's sin was pride, and specifically pride in its most noxious form, spiritual pride. By some accounts, the actual occasion of his fall was his objection to the contamination of spirit with flesh in the creation of mankind. It is said that he rebelled against an act of God which seemed to him an indignity to spirit. He was therefore expelled from heaven and became the archenemy of the human race. Page 78. Clearly, the whole force of original existential guilt is that it be an obscure and gnawing sense of being profoundly in the wrong, though for no discernible reason. Governments maintain this sense in a mild form by seeing to it that the laws are so complex that every citizen is inadvertently guilty of some crime, making it possible to convict anyone when convenient. Religions do it much more thoroughly, often suggesting that one's very existence is in some way an effrontery and an offense against God. O God, for as much as without thee we are unable to please thee. If we say that we have no sin, we deceive ourselves, and the truth is not in us. Enter not into judgment with thy servant, O Lord, for in thy sight shall no man living be justified. Behold, I was shapen in wickedness, and in sin hath my mother conceived me. It makes no difference that being born in sin was the fault not of God, but of Lucifer or Adam in some remote age. The actual effect of the idea of original sin is to feel that natural existence is in some way both a fault and one's own fault. But of course, the something awful that has gone wrong and which must not be mentioned is, in reality, that is, in God, the production of the original illusion in which the Creator seems to become the creature, the act of hiding in the game of hide and seek. The same act is, on other levels, the narrowing of attention to engender the conscious ego, and the loss of faith in spontaneous impulse. Yet, what is more, the apprehension of this act of hiding as a nameless evil for which we feel deeply guilty is in fact a way of ensuring that the game shall not end too soon. It confirms us in the sense of separate individuality and responsibility. It is the flaming sword that turns in all directions and guards the way of return to paradise, preventing us from daring to recognize, upon pain of the utmost blasphemy, that we are each the Lord in hiding. Before we have the courage to attain that recognition, we must follow the difficult way of consciousness and the discipline of the Word, to the point where the ego's pride in itself is entirely debunked, not masochistically, but in the spirit of cosmic humor. Without this particular deflation of the ego, we might imagine ourselves to be one with a God who takes himself seriously.